All right, I got sound from you back.
Sound check.
Yeah, you talk because I need to hear you first.
Sound check. 1, 2, 3. This is episode 13 of Don't Call Me for IT Support. I
Got it.
can't. Oh, perfect.
You're there too. We are live. You are there. I am there. We are combined live. Uh, Dustin did say he was going to join in, so we might actually get some comments from some people. I
Oh,
literally, I,
oh, Dustin
yep,
down in Charlotte.
yep, Manning.
Nice. Sweet. All right. Probably go ahead and start soon.
We're live.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're about to start.
Okay. Got me a water.
Share it with one more group of people so they can see it because, you know, might as well. You can go ahead and intro us.
So this is Chris Touchberry and Brad Medlin. We are not your typical IT guys, and this is the Don't Call Me for IT Support, episode 13. So, did CES really matter?
Yeah, does it? Does it? I mean, CES is a annual show. Once again, well, this year actually it was mildly, how do I say this? Mildly in person. There were folks that were in person for it, um, but a lot of the major players pulled out at the last minute, unfortunately. If you are live and you are watching us, please feel free to stop in and say hi in the chat. Let us know if you want to talk about anything. Feel free to follow the link tree in the description and follow us on the other platforms and just check us out. I am going to be commenting as myself, so are you going to comment as yourself, Chris, as IT guys, Chris?
I can comment as the 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 channel.
There you go. I like it.
All
Um, so I know the rundown is there, and we are going to use the rundown to a degree. There's links inside the description to a lot of what we're going to cover, guys. However, I did want to start with something unique and do something a little different this time, and that is I want to share the best of CES. So once again, Engadget was selected to kind of tell everybody about all the cool things that happened at CES, and so they deployed the best of CES awards to everybody. And a lot of times, this is where you can find some of the hot new tech that's coming out, or something that is, just overall favorites and new devices. There's a video associated with it, but it also does, if you read the article on Engadget, and I will go ahead and I'll actually put that commented as myself into the chat description, so anybody that wants to get to that article can. I love it when Dustin shows up. I expect hilarious comments. I did tell him to heckle us, Chris, so there is that.
right.
So I'm going to swap over to this, to the display where we're showing this off here. And yes, Dustin, for your sake, there is a actual Stream Deck, the XL that I have that I use. If you don't have one, Dustin, you probably ought to get one. They're pretty awesome. They are pretty programmable. And that includes like putting in hotkeys and stuff for like Scene and Cyclone and that kind of stuff. Anything that you would use as a hotkey, it's pretty nice. I use it a lot for if you don't you apologize in advance. I don't like that. I'm not okay with apologies in advance. Apology mildly not accepted, but okay at the same time. But the first thing that comes up here on the Best of CES is a accessibility product. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to see how this goes, and I kind of want one for myself, begrudgingly, because this looks really cool for a lot of different reasons. My favorite of all of the reasons being that there is it's basically designed, it's a camera that attaches to glasses. So for blind folks like myself, if I'm wearing my glasses, which I have glasses, guys, I do wear glasses occasionally. I wear contacts most of the time, but I would wear glasses a lot more for something like this because this is really cool and a really cool kind of setup. So what this is it is a device basically that can like read text for you, can read anything else that's out there for you, and it also has like a assistability for folks. It's expensive. That's why I said if I could get one, I would love to, but it's $4,000 basically to start. But I mean, something like this in the future, as these things get cheaper and smaller, I mean, it pairs to headphones. It can read a book for you, for lack of a better word.
Wow.
I mean, it's a powerful little thing, and you can actually go in. They have a sub link within it that you can go check out, and it's got a larger article.
So it
Obviously,
seems it looks like it's a lot more than a Google Glass, because
it,
that's what it looked like. You know, the Google Glasses from like, oh dear, like,
oh gosh, yes, I remember. I Glass. I remember Google Glass. I wanted some so
yeah,
bad, but never ever got it.
yeah,
They were
yeah.
either never in stock or not available for me to find. I was definitely intrigued and wanted them. That's for sure. Um, but yeah, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how these something like that can develop. Guys, for all of those out there, if I looked in the mirror, it would just, I hope it would. You'd probably do the same thing to me, Dustin. That, or if I looked in the mirror and I didn't have a shirt on, it'd tell me to put a shirt on. I'm betting it probably has like weather updates too, and it will see what you're wearing. Like, it's going to be a little cold for that. That'd be kind of hilarious too. Put more clothes on. Get it for your kids. That there it is. Perfect purchase for parents with kids. Anytime they look at themselves in the mirror and it says put more clothes on, I'm all for that. All for it. Think it'll be hilarious. Um, yes, it did come out with a wearable talking about a mask, the $100 Zephyr mask. Obviously, COVID cases are kind of back on the rise. Omicron, uh, or Omicron, however you say it, I can't remember. It's one of those Greek letters, and I never learned Greek very well. But it is a kind of cool little mask. Where was I reading? I think I was reading the actual article about it, that it actually has oh no, it's the Razer one that will actually like amplify your voice. It's got speakers and a microphone to amplify your voice, and it's kind of cool. I still want to know how the Chevy Silverado EV got best transportation tech. Although I guess it's more of the newest of news kind of thing. And I'm also wondering, because I didn't actually read a lot about the Silverado though, but I'm wondering if it's got the work truck version. Oh my gosh, there's a work truck version of this. Yeah, my company's going to be all over these things. 400-mile range. I mean, it's not bad. It's literally
It's
got a
not bad.
lot. It's got a lot going
Yeah.
on for it, but I'm wondering if it's got an independent rear suspension, which I'm sure it does because independent motors. The next product you and I actually talked about before, Chris, I think. Maybe not in the last one, but the one before that. It's the Eco Remote from Samsung. Like, guys, I know it's a home theater product,
Yeah.
and we don't, it's not super work related, but this is kind of cool because it can recharge using RF signals from your router. And we
Oh,
all
that's cool.
imagine being in, okay, I'm using myself as an example. I live in an apartment. I can't remember if Dustin lives in an apartment or not, but maybe he does. But if you did, and you're surrounded by everyone and all of their Wi-Fi, like if I pulled up my wireless networks right now, guys, you would see. All right, I gotta do it on my cell phone so you can laugh at it. Just to look at all the Wi-Fi networks. There are probably 15 or 20 full strength. I don't say 15 or 20. There's probably 4 or 5 full strength signals and 15 or 20 that are 2 of the 3 Wi-Fi bars. I mean, that's a lot of RF. A remote like this in a place like this or hotels or stuff like that would be huge. Never have to worry about batteries ever again. Obviously, new routers are going to be new routers. That's kind of awesome. But now we get to some of the more intriguing items. They have a 17-inch tablet coming out from Asus, the Zenbook Fold. That
The
is
router.
what now?
The router is just a spider-looking router.
It is, but it's also got super gain antennas on it, so it's going to have a very, very large range. I actually upgraded my antennas on one of my old routers to do something like that before, and it's pretty cool. Like I said, I live in an apartment complex, and I can see my router at the pool, which is 110 yards away. Right? You know, that's kind of cool to me. I feel like that's a source of something that would just be interesting. Um, Scrolling down to the Zenbook Fold. I mean, so these are some of the products that I think you're really going to start seeing. So the phone or tablet, that's obviously, guys, they're not really covering phones as much as they used to because phones are really just becoming small tablets. So this is a Zenbook Fold. And like I said, you really need to go through all of some of these things. Obviously, they have Samsung has a new OLED, which is kind of cool. So I don't know. Have you read this before?
I don't think so. I know about the wall,
Yep. So
but
this is something that is coming, guys. And so their OLED tech also uses QLED tech. It uses basically just a certain color spectrum diode. If I remember, it's the blue one, but it's just a blue light emitting diode for the actual organic LED. And the Q for that, the QLED is so basically it uses the blue uh, OLED panel, which means you can light up every pixel individually and use blue as the backlight, basically as a bright backlight. And then it uses that almost like a micro LED setup. And so the actual, just like a micro LED setup from Samsung right now. Keep in mind, this is the kind of tech that's going to come to workstation monitors and stuff like that very soon. Obviously, they'll be the high end ones, so in the $1,000 plus range. But the actual, wow, that thing just jumped up. I'm watching my Wi-Fi, and it keeps the number of Wi-Fi's out there just keep massively growing. It's hilarious. But the OLED backlighting is basically what you're getting behind quantum dot, which if you watch some of the Linus Tech Tip videos about quantum dot displays, there is some solid performance out there, y'all. A lot of solid performance from those new mini LED type or multi-display zone LED type built QLED displays. They're awesome. You really need to look into them more and more if you haven't, especially for a TV that you're going to use as a monitor or something like that. Just kind of keep that in mind. Additionally, there's a really cool setup from them though that from a monitor perspective where you're seeing quantum dot. They're already making quantum dot ultrawides. They have a 49-inch that's basically $2,000. The double 27, Chris. Those are pretty neat little setups. they're pushing them in the gaming market first, but they're making their way to the workstation market, and that is going to be interesting. VR2, PlayStation's VR2, which you can't see mine very well, but I got myself a Quest 2 for Christmas, so we're going to have to talk about something that's related to that too. It's actually another Engadget article that I'll tag everybody in. Once again, I've got to say this: Lenovo, man, oh man, they're pushing the bounds with stuff, guys. So they have a ultra wide laptop that they have out now, which is really cool. They have so much tech that's just coming out right now. I mean, kind of, you really need to follow Lenovo if you don't, because their workstations and their ThinkPads and their ThinkStations for the desktops that are coming out here in the near future are really going to start pushing the bounds of what you can buy from an OEM. Obviously, Chris, we like to talk about the things that you make all the time, but this is purely from a laptop perspective. You kind of have that, and that's kind of cool thing to ponder over. The Z13 and Z16 are some great ones. They're going to offer every kind of CPU, which you know how I feel about CPUs and GPUs and all that stuff. You want to be very hardware agnostic. We're going to talk about some CPUs and GPUs here in a minute from the rundown. And then you got a sustainable project, which is a Goodyear Tire Tech. Again, it's a great one. Wild card is the BMW coming up with a new electric car, basically. And best of the best, somehow or another, Chevy took the best, transportation and the best overall, which is kind of crazy. But these Silverados are really going to be something people are looking at. I mean, it's the fact that it has a 400-mile range, or up to a 400-mile range. That alone from an EV. We talk about EVs all the time at work because, I work for an electric company and they always want you to push the bounds. But I got to say, man, the thing with EVs has always been the range. I don't know, and maybe Dustin will reply what he thinks, but with EVs, it's always a range thing. I don't know why, but the current vehicle that we have that I use feels like weekly is a 2013 Ford F-150 that somehow has a 38-gallon fuel tank. Yes, that's a lot of gas. Yes, it's a V8, but it still gets 22 miles per gallon. And if you 22 miles per gallon on the highway. And if you do the math with that, just so you're wondering, if you do the math on it, that's a long way on a 38-gallon tank you can drive.
Like,
I'm going to give you the reference here, Chris, because you're in Raleigh. So we've done the math on it before. On a single tank of gas, with some fuel to spare most likely, you could drive that truck from our office in Seneca, South Carolina, to Wilmington and back and not have to refuel.
wow.
Yeah, that's a little bit much. I would never make that kind of trip, but that's the kind of thing that I think about. So if I've got to drive to Wilmington and then but if I can make it to Wilmington, which is not quite 400 miles, but if I can make it to Wilmington and then be able to charge, that's pretty manageable. I mean, that's not a bad deal. It's always those opportunities where it's like, yeah, let's have this conversation. Let's make some decisions. Let's do some things differently. You get those differences together, and they kind of compound some things and compound how you do stuff. So I don't want to make people watch any of the videos from the topics because that's just kind of a waste of, I think, everybody's time. However, I do want to talk about a lot of what happened at CES, and I'll do that by seeing if I can find some of the like non-YouTube-ish videos. this is one that I was really impressed with. So I'm actually going to bring it up and show you the Intel webpage, and I'll put it on the chat right now.
This is that first link.
No, it's not. It's
Right.
not the
Oh.
first link, but it's this. I'll put it in there. I'm putting it in chat, but I'll also put it in the rundown as well, Chris, for you.
Okay.
It's Intel's deep link architecture. So we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna talking CPUs and GPUs and true work related processing things now. You know, gotta love Dustin to death. He just got himself a 12900K, and that's a epically sweet processor. One of the things they launched at CES was the KS SKU, which, if you know, the KS SKU is just basically because they know that the 12900K has a lot of room to push. They
Yeah.
took some golden samples and created the KS version that's got a 5.2 gigahertz all core, all P core, and a 4 gigahertz all core clock, E-core clock. That's impressive. And I would not be surprised if you push the E-cores to 4.2 or 4.5 gigahertz, which eight threads like that, a Skylake at 4.5 is pretty darn powerful.
I was wondering if Intel was going to release, because now they're making processors and dedicated video cards, and I was wondering if they were going to release some sort of, like, if you had an all Intel build, would you have any benefits from doing that? And
Houston,
it looks like
let me
Deep Link might be that thing.
let me change my display to show it off. That is exactly what that is, Chris.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to remember the board that had it, because I had one. And so, Dustin, you said sheesh, but you definitely need to pay attention to this. It's a potential for a GPU for you to buy for your build. Intel GPUs are, first of all, I got to get this one out there. It's part of the second part of the rundown, but there is a discussion about Intel quietly from their webpage dropped the Q1 2022 launch. It just says 2022 launch now. I believe they did that because they launched it at CES, not because it's a Q1 launch anymore. They launched it. They have launched the product. Art graphics are better. This is a little bit better than M1 Tech, actually, Dustin. So what this is going to do for you, for instance, is your 12900K has an iGPU in it. It is not the most powerful. It'll enhance other iGPUs a little bit better on some of like the weaker SKUs. But what this is it is a way to improve performance. So Asus used to make a board like this. So back when they had, when they didn't have the GPU built into the chip, I'm talking Core 2 days, guys. I have the motherboard downstairs that proves this. But back when they didn't have the GPU on board, and the North Bridge didn't exist as part of the actual CPU anymore, so your iGPU was basically your integrated graphics had to be something built into the motherboard. They had a technology that was similar to SLI for NVIDIA, but basically it took the onboard graphics and could combine it in an NVLink, or not an NVLink, but in an SLI type setup, where the iGPU would basically assist the discrete GPU you had in boosting performance. So it would do some of the workload and then pass that data on, because everything still had to run through that North Bridge to get to the GPU anyways. Deep Link, though, allows you to do encoding faster. AI processes go faster. It allows for better power sharing inside the laptops. Like I said, it's great. It's a great feature for laptops, but I see a lot of potential with a lot of software stacks moving to more GPU rendering types. And Dustin, I think you'll appreciate this. Scene, for instance, now is got the newest versions of Scene have a lot of GPU enhancements built into them. They are actually using CUDA to do a lot of the processes that they used to not, quite quite honestly. They used to not run very well that way, and now, I mean, I'm seeing spikes in the middle of processing of the processor drops from 100% utilization to 45% during a registration, and all of a sudden now the GPU's hitting 50% with the CPU, and they're communicating back and forth. And so there's a lot of potential with this, where CPU sharing could be, okay, hey, I'm going to use the iGPU some too, and then I'm also going to bounce some off the regular GPU and share the load a lot better. And it means that if you've got an integrated GPU, you kind of get some perk benefits to it. I mean, it incentivizes you to actually buy a CPU. Yes, okay. You asked about performances. So I'm trying to find the actual video. But they did have a performance number set up. Here you go. I'm going to play this, but I'm not going to have the volume coming out to anybody's. So this one, or is it? I've got to see if I can find it. So this is actually on a Tiger Lake chip, comically. This is it's an AI functionality, so not exactly what we want to see. They showed a demonstration doing video editing, Dustin, and it basically completed the task. Here it is. This is DaVinci Resolve, so this is the one that did. It completes the task much faster. Much faster. So let's see if it tells us the number here. If it does, I'll blow it up. So yeah, actually, I'm going to back it up here. Go full screen so you can see it. So you can watch here how much faster the actual blended is. So you've got regular discrete work. So in basically a little under half the time, or a little under half the time, it completes the render, Dustin. They're saying it's something like 140 to 100. I think it was like between 135 and 145% faster at creating a render. So for like a content creator or something like that, it's a very marked difference. Granted, that's not going to be for everybody. Your performance may vary. Obviously, if you're running it on the desktop iGPU versus a better versus like an Iris Xe Max laptop GPU, you're not going to see 140%, but you might see 125% faster, 120% faster. Because I think Iris Xe Max, let me go see how many encoders it has on it. How many processing nodes. Rabbit hole. So it's integrated by, it's just software. It's a software patch that runs on the code. So Iris Xe Max. Give me the specs. All right. I'm going to ARC.
And this is, I imagine that this would only be available on like a core line. It wouldn't be on like
remember,
a Xeon.
You have like Xeon E and Xeon D that are integrated solutions. Some of them
That's true.
And the Xeon Ws that you see in like laptops that'll enhance. But it's basically a simple software patch and solution. So I'm going to go look at the 12th generation, because they now actually have launched all of the. They don't have any of the mobile products. Yeah, they do. There's 1200H, but I want to see a. Oh, it's i9. Why am I looking at i9? Let me go look at i7. So that's going to have a Xe Max. So I went to 11th gen, not 12th gen. Wow. 12th gen i7. So let me see.
Are you trying to find
the actual processor that has like Iris Xe Max built onto it?
probably that one? The 12800 HE or the H. I would imagine that it's the HE.
Okay, this is gonna, so this is the newer version. So Iris Xe Max is gonna have 96 execution units on the new version. They were doing it on a on an 11th gen, which probably had 64 execution units. So in theory, if you got a better, like I said, the major enhancements to this, Dustin, is laptops. However, it is going to see a performance uplift on desktops too that integrate these solutions. And they have mentioned that it's not just for laptops. I would also expect that this might be another enhancement that they launch that happens to support if you have multi-GPU as well. Intel's been talking about multi-GPU solutions a little bit here and there. And if you watch some of the leaking channels and people like that, you're starting to see some leaks that are coming out talking about how, so NVIDIA's best of the best have NVLink, but if this is a software or driver-based solution that can get you on two similarly spec'd GPUs, could get you, I don't know, 30% enhancement on the actual runs on, or not even 30%, but because imagine if you got the 512 version of the 512 execution version, if you can get 160%, 180% enhancement just from driver stacks, this isn't like a memory sharing bus bandwidth kind of thing like that. If that multi-GPU support comes out and they've got that kind of, I mean, imagine two of the, and we don't quite know what pricing is going to be, but let's take an assumption and say it's on the high end. Let's say it's $700 a GPU, and Intel releases more than enough, $699. And Intel, because they have a supply windfall from what they did with all of their substrates and stuff in the past, Intel comes out and has plenty of supply to not cause the demand streak to, the demand curve to spike the price quickly. So you pay $700 per GPU, you got $1,400 in two 16 gigabyte cards with 512 execution units, and okay, we'll round up with taxes and say you're spending $1,800, but you're getting 3090 Ti plus actual performance levels. Like, I mean, you're paying basically half the price, maybe not half, but a quarter of the price, or 25% off, I mean. Not a quarter of the price, but 25% less for a graphics card setup that would allow you to perform, and I would say 25% less than MSRP for a graphics setup that could allow you to truly outperform, especially keep in mind, this is not going to be in gaming, guys. Deep Link is not going to be something that truly enhances gaming like this. It might provide some benefits, obviously, kind of like SLI and NVLink can, but I mean, it's not going to be the same kind of performance because you're not truly sharing bandwidth between GPUs. You're not truly sharing, you don't have a good way for frame-to-frame setups. But Intel sounds like their driver work. And keep in mind, Intel's one of the largest software corporations in the world from a driver's perspective because they're so much larger than AMD and than NVIDIA right now. So just kind of imagine that. Just kind of put that in the back of your head. That's a big deal. That's a very big deal. I kind of want to highlight this, and we'll go back to a few of us. But there's something else that's kind of crazy. So I mentioned it earlier, but Intel has launched their ARC graphics cards. They're out there. They are shipping to OEMs right now. I'd imagine, Chris, that means they're going to start hitting distribution channels pretty soon. I don't know what variants they're going to have. We know they have several that are coming out. The most interesting, of course, to me is probably going to be the 512 execution unit version, but they also have a 128 execution unit version that's coming out, which should perform like a 1650 Ti. I mean, which in theory performs like a 1070 Ti. I mean, you're going to see performance kind of besting itself and getting out there. I am going to transition to this because we're talking about GPUs and just say this. So, NVIDIA launched the 3090 Ti, whatever. Gosh almighty, the guy could not figure out what it is. They've got a head of the guy that did the conversation. Like the whole world has called them TI cards, Chris, for how long? I mean,
A while.
but it's because it stands for titanium. It's the atomic lettering for titanium. Nobody calls titanium Ti. They say, all right, it's the atomic name Ti. So we're talking about that kind of stuff. Well, NVIDIA had a couple other launches. They launched the 3050 on desktop, which they launched the 3050 with 8 gigs of VRAM. And I want to actually look at some specs. So 30.
Seems like a rather good product, but an oddly...
It's priced about $250. But I also want to compare it to something so that we can kind of have a conversation about this. It's priced at $250, but with 8 gigs of RAM. So this is the other thing. And this is why I'm going to put these pages up, pull them up side by side so everybody can look at them and then I'm going to pull it up.
Is it like a 2060 Super? Or...
Well, I was going to compare it to like the, I can't think of the name of the A2000 kind of spec wise. So,
Okay. But with more RAM.
yeah. Well, although NVIDIA is launching a 12 gig A2000.
There are so many different combinations.
Right. Call it what you want to call it, but they have the A2000 and then they have the A2000 12 gig. So that's just crazy to me why they did that. All right. So the A2000 is going to be about versus the 3050. So let me pull the page up and let everybody see this now. Screen shared. So a 3050 has 2560 CUDA cores. It does have ray tracing cores and all that stuff. It is, a low power type card. It's got a 130 watt TDP, so it's a higher wattage than the A2000, which to me, I'm kind of like, why? I'm wondering if it's going to be single slot.
Sports 8K. It supports 8K. Jesus.
Okay, Chris, backtrack yourself on that. Everything supports 8K that's released recently.
True.
It's just, can it handle what you're wanting to run at 8K?
That's a different story.
So like
I forgot about that.
Giving a great example of this. This is something that I've been learning a lot recently when testing the A2000. The maximum supported display, if you're not doing something that's highly graphically intensive, but you want to be able to see a lot of visualization properties to something, an A2000 is perfectly fine for 8K. Now, you're not going to run games at 8K.
No.
But that's not the point of it. So
It's just running the monitor.
My world, for instance, if I'm wanting to display 8K and do, scan processing, could it do it? Yes, it could display it. Now, I won't be able to get the benefits that I'm getting right now from having the two GPU enhancements inside of my processing workflow. But could someone else, use this on a high power machine to enhance them and not have to pay for an RTX 6000, A6000, or A5000, or A4000? Yeah, I mean, if you need something that's just going to display it and you want to put it on an 8K monitor, like if you're doing a video board or something that's 8K, they're perfect for that. If all you're doing is running it as a display, not going to hurt you. You do get the NVIDIA encoder and NVENC and NVDEC. NVDEC.
NVENC.
Well, NVENC is the encoder. The decoder is NVDEC.
Oh.
You do get both of those. However, the A2000 does have more CUDA cores at 3,328 as opposed to the 3050's 2560.
Well, but the A2000 is also like a $650 card. Like it,
450.
oh yeah.
450. I'm keeping MSRPs at this point in time for comparison because you're going to understand why I'm going to do that here in just a second. All right, so I pulled this up. Let me pull the actual product page up for it. So AMD also launched a low-end GPU at $199 that is the 6500 XT. There's a meme out there on YouTube if y'all want to watch it. Feel free to because it's kind of funny about how AMD launched a 5-year-old GPU with less VRAM for the same price. So if you scroll and compare now granted, you're getting things like ray accelerators and some better compute units, but from a purely compute perspective, side by side, oh my dude, we gotta check this out. 115 frames per second at 1080p high settings in Farming Simulator 22. I mean, but you look at what it's comparing. You know, the comparisons are Call of Duty Vanguard 1080p high, you're getting 61 frames per second. Apex Legends max settings, you're getting 91 frames per second. Fortnite, you're getting some, and then you've got super resolution, which is going to help boost some of your performance too. So I mean, there's a lot to it. The difference right here is this: 4 gigs of VRAM. So it's the same technical performance as a RX 480, but it is got 4 gigs versus 8 gigs of the 480. And somebody out there might be like, what the ham sandwich? Why? So NVIDIA launches a 3050, which is about 20% less. Calculator time, ladies and gentlemen. Rabbit hole. So what's the A2000? It is 3328. Oh, no, I gotta do the drive. This 2560. Divided by 3328. So it's 77% of a A2000 at 130 watts on board power. But it has 8 gigs of VRAM. What does that mean that the 3050 can do that the Radeon 6500 will not be able to do for the next 6 to 8 months until things change? What it means is that it won't be able to mine.
All right. Yeah.
Because miners want a minimum of 5 gigs. They prefer more, but so what this is, it is AMD doing its best to make a card that is truly and utterly designed for gamers. It's still high priced. And that would mean it would be a good card for, you know, once again, display out folks that just need a display out. But they also, you know, this is kind of that perfect crossover card for somebody that wants a low-end card that's going to perform at current levels, that has ray accelerators and something like that. It's a gaming card, guys. It's not a workstation card. It's not like a W6600, because the W6600 has 8 gigs. But it also means that miners can't get to it, so it's a product for people to actually be able to buy. And it's expensive at $199. This is something that 5 years ago, yeah, it might have launched at that price, but currently it should be somewhere around $100. AMD is going to make a bunch of money off of this thing, but they made it specifically so that gamers could get to stuff. So I can appreciate that. I can appreciate that in the current supply market that we are in and we have. It's kind of funny to think about. And I think it's a great process to look through and talk through. The other thing that we can talk about though is, so Intel expanded its Evo line, which is basically like its high performance but lower power usage setup. So for those of us that need portability in a laptop, that have to carry a heavy book to do some work on, but want to have something that's not so massive to be able to do our work on, they expanded their Evo line. This is actually in the rundown, but the article goes to Deep Link. But I will pull up something on it. Swap back over, and I'll pull up something on the Evo expansion because it's a good thing to look at. They did expand their Evo line to support the new H series processors now by adding in Deep Link so that you can get a lot of power savings, and having the i9 line now officially supported that way. So it is a new process. It's going to involve XE Max, and it's also going to involve what do you call it, Chris? So it's XE Max, but it's also going to involve, that's where that HE sets up. So actually, I'm going to go back to ARC too. So if you go back to the 12th gen 4i9 processors, and you'll see that H, I don't know if it's the H or the H. Might be the E. No, that's UHD.
Where? That's the E. It's not the HE.
Hey, it's the HK that gets it. I gotta look. Yep, it's the HK, the H and HK, and the i9 now get 96 execution units. So they have tripled the previous i9's execution units on the laptop, which means that they can do a lot more power sharing. And if you get a DGPU that is Intel based with the ARC lineup, that's the top of the end version. Once again, I don't know if the top will come in, but I do want to talk about this too because Intel did expand their stack. So let's take a minute for this because this is the first talking point. We didn't really cover it that much. So Intel released the rest of the Alder Lake product stack. So from i9 down to i3, and I think I want to find that article. Hang on a second. Or at least find something on Intel's page that explains it. I might be able to look here. I don't see. All right, so let's see. There we go. Just brief. Just need to find out if it gives me all of the 12 gen. Yep, it does give me this. So this is enough to know. So the new i9s and the new i7s and the new i5s and new i3s, all the way down though, the stack, get a new selection of setups. So first and foremost, the i3s do not have any E-cores. Some of the i5s will have 6P and 4E, or they'll have 6P and no E. The i7s are 8P and 8E, and the i9s are 8P and 8E unless you're on laptop. Then the i7s and the i9s both are 6P and 6E, 6P and 8E for the i9s and the i7s. The difference between an i9 and an i7 on laptop is boost speed. So I'll do a comparison so you can see it. So add compare, backtrack, go to 12 gen i7, and we're going to go to the 12700H, or do the 12800HE. This 12700H is the same thing. The HE is just going to probably have the bigger setup. All right, so what you can see down here is I want to add to compare, and then I'll show you the differences between the two. These are, like I said, these are the laptop-based products, guys. So an i7 is going to have it's going to be a little bit different. Oh, that's what the E is. The E is embedded. So if I go back, 12800H, add to compare, 12700H. The E is for embedded processor, Chris. So now we know. And then I'm going to back up. Good talking to you, Dustin. Have a good one, man. We'll talk to you soon. And we'll go 12th generation i5. And I'll pull up this one, the 12500H. And then just the regular 12500. So that you can kind of see the stack and the way it works out. So I'm going to take the HE out if I don't need it. Because we know it's an embedded processor. All right, so hey, this even has some pricing for everybody that wants to see it. So the HK, obviously more expensive. That's well known. But if you come down here, what you're going to see is so the 12800H, the 12700H, and the 800H over. So it's exactly how it falls. All right, there we go. So the 12700H is a max turbo of 4.7. It's got a 4.5 and 3.5 gigahertz base clock. The 12800 for, and this is the that's E-core. This is max turbo. Let's see if it's got the actual map base clocks. It's just showing turbo clocks now. It's okay. I'm not going to worry about too much. So you can see there's a performance top out here, right? That's okay. Performance top out is fine. Over here, what I do want to show you is the 12500, the i5 12500, non-H or non-K, all that stuff. This thing has got just 6 P cores. So if you don't need the E cores and you're not looking for a lot of the multi-core performance, and it's got a way absolute price because that's backwards. So that is definitely backwards. It's $202. So for 200, between 200, probably 215, 220 on the street once you get it to Newegg or so on and so forth, you're getting 6 E cores that are going to be pretty dang epic in compared to like an R5 processor, guys. So like a 5600. Do they have a 5600, Chris? Did they launch a 5 series?
AMD?
Yeah.
Yeah. They've
So
got a
so
50.
5600X. So, and we'll talk about
Yep.
AMD here in a second too. So they've got a 5600X. So this is kind of going to compete with that. There's 6 big cores against 6 big cores with hyper-threading, so 12 and 12 threads. Yeah, it's going to be a competitor with that, and it's going to be priced rather well to compete with that as well. Now, you're not getting overclocking and so on and so forth, but that's not necessary either. If you look at the one downside of like the 12500H, so the one downside with the 12500H is this. You get a little bit less in the Iris Xe graphics. So only 80 compute units as opposed to 96. All the laptops get massive bumps. There's only 32 execution units in the old i9s from last generation. The reason that they're getting such a big bump is because they have a lot more die space now that they don't have. So these only have 6 P cores and 80 cores on the i9, i7 setup. But do you really need more than that, guys? I mean, we can talk about it till we're blue in the face, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you we don't. Like 6P and, 6P cores and 80 cores on a laptop is going to absolutely blow away a 8P core basically lineup from Iceland. They showed some graphs at CES, and let me see if I can find that article real quick so I can show you that because you'll enjoy this. They beat the M1 Max in performance. And that alone to me is pretty impressive. And yes, obviously, guys, here's the image. So this is just iMore. It's not an article. You could just search Intel versus thing. When you see this graph, it pops up, Chris. This is you see the 5900HX, you see the 11900K, 11980HK, the 12900HK. It does use a little bit more power in watts, but its performance is, well over an M1 Max. Yes, once again, Apple has a great. The thing about ARM is that it is very power efficient. That is great, but it is not going to stand alone. And if you've got more performance, a lot of people would say, hey, I'll sacrifice a little bit of battery life for performance. A lot of people will do that. I mean, that's not uncommon. A great example of this is the 3D V-Cache chip. So, Chris, AMD has launched one CPU. One. Yes, if it's something that might tie over enthusiasts that want to have the fastest gaming performance, it may tie those over. But we're gonna look at this here. So we're not comparing it to a 12900K anymore, guys. So when AMD launched the 5900 and 5958X, all their comparison charts were to Intel. There's a reason marketing doesn't want to show the Intel numbers, is because they're probably close to or better in a lot. They're probably splitting and tying a lot with Intel. They might have more performance here and less performance there, but they're probably a lot closer to each other in gaming, which means that in other applications they're the same way. So in terms of using this solution for CAD, I'm still not going to be able to sit back and, as a honest, wholehearted person, recommend an AMD chip for CAD, purely because this is not the kind of solution that's going to make it better at CAD than it's not going to dramatically improve its performance in single-threaded CAD workloads over Alder Lake. Now, it's going to bring it up to where it's something that needs to be tested by folks. But this is probably going to be a limited run processor. They also showed off at CES a working Zen 4 design where all cores were at 5 gigahertz.
There's cooling on that.
But hang on now. That's more impressive to me. Once again, it was an 8-core chip. I think. Let me pull the research up on it real fast. See if I can find it. I had an article that I was looking at earlier.
And for 5 gigahertz, it was Ryzen 7000.
Yep, but I'm trying to find out how many cores it was. So that's the thing. That's what they don't talk about, guys. And once again, it gets back to marketing. What are we hiding in our marketing? Okay, we've got all the Zen 4 cores at 5 gigahertz and certain peak CPU clocks boosting over 5 gigahertz. That's great, guys. But if that's only on an 8-core CPU
or a 6-core,
well, no, it's probably an 8-core. But if it's only on an 8-core and a 16-thread machine, that's very different than if it's on a 16-core, where you've got double the thermal load of that CPU. Now, it means that it's technically feasible. which means that if you've got proper cooling and you could overclock a 7950X potentially, and that, from a, once again, when you're getting up to that level, depending on what you're doing from a work perspective, you really ought to be looking at the Xeon Scalable Threadripper Pro market to begin with. If you're willing to go and buy top of the line from a workstation, and keep in mind, this is not a discussion about gaming. I know we've mentioned it and we're excited that AMD's launched the 6500 XT to help gamers out. But this whole podcast and the whole discussion that we're having is much more tied to actual real world work use cases. And if you're buying a 5950X and you're buying that for work purposes, you really are undercutting yourself by spending that much. You ought to be looking in the Threadripper market because you're missing out on a lot of the I/O benefits. So realistically, take a step back, make sure you understand why, but you ought to be looking in that market if that's where you're at. And I would say the same thing to a lot of people buying 12900Ks right now, and people that buy the 12900KS, is that if you're looking in that market, you ought to be looking at some of the other stuff. Now, 12900K, Alder Lake's going to give you a little bit more upgradability, future-proofing kind of setups. But realistically, the market and the conversation that we're having here is workstation products. Now, will this compete with the 12900KS? Probably. It'll be probably matching it clock for clock, or matching and tying, like I said, in performance. But realistically, the conversation you have to be having with yourself if you're buying these processors is that really where I need to be? Now, truthfully, if you're doing just a CAD build, absolutely. If you're doing, reality capture, content creation, sure, they can work in that level. But you're limited by PCI Express bandwidth, and you're limited by drive storage bandwidth because of that. So, I mean, I think I need to look back at the Zen 4 setups, but mainly because I want to look at the next gen. I need to look at the next gen architectures, but they are moving to LGA as opposed to the pin grid, so that's going to be helpful. But once again, like I said, the conversation that we should be having and that we need to be having right now is, where do you want to go with things? I mean, price to performance right now, Intel is still going to have the win for if you just want like a general purpose computer. Right now, AMD obviously is going to probably release some more things throughout the year to try to compete with that and the rest of the Alder Lake stack. But as an enthusiast, yes, it's great to have this competition. But from a workstation perspective, I mean, a lot of people, like I said, for the most part, 90% of my job I do on a laptop. It's a high performance laptop. But when you compare these 12900 HKs to Ryzen 5000 HK, products, and then the newly launched 6000 products, there's gonna be some differences. And as a matter of fact, I'll go back to that slide that Intel showed off. They compared their 12900 HK to Ryzen 9 5900HX. That's basically the top of the line Ryzen 5 processor you can buy. Now, they're on a mildly better node at this point, and so that means that their wattage usage is a little bit lower. But if you notice, whether it's at 25 watts or whether it's at 45 watts, it doesn't really scale that much. It's similar performance. And that's great, meaning you can get a lower power CPU to do a lot more of your general compute. That's awesome. Battery life should be better on a 5900HX. However, if you're using these things for performance on a laptop, it's probably going to peak up higher where you need to go with performance, and you're willing to spend a little more power and sacrifice battery life. And that's where these Evo designs that are going to be powerful but can also drop the battery life back down are going to be important. So I I kind of see a lot of options that are coming out. There's a lot of new tech that CES launched. Like I said, you need to go and kind of do some research to yourself to really looking at some of these new tech items that are coming out that are going to be enhancing our lives and the world. The big one to me, though, like I said, though, we now have a full product set from Alder Lake. There is a new Vcache chip. Like I said, from my perspective, I'd love to get one just to test it in CAD workloads and see if it's something for CAD folks that could benefit, because most CAD packages are single threaded. So if it does have a definitive single thread performance win over the 12900 KS, I'd say that's probably where you ought to be looking. But I don't know that it will. We already know, and this is something we don't have in the rundown, but we can discuss about it. We already know that Intel's killed AVX5 is killing or doing everything they can to kill AVX512 on Alder Lake. Now Sapphire Rapids will have full AVX512 and actually some wider buses available to it as well. But just keep in mind, there's a lot of new tech that's going to be the next 12 months. The advancements that are coming, it's going to be good. It's going to be interesting. Competition is once again back. Everybody's moving forward with all that competition. We're going to see more cores finally in the Xeon Scalable markets to compete with Threadripper or Threadripper Pro, I should say, and Epic. I mean, Xeon W is going to be the same kind of setup. Things are getting better for high power, extreme end users, and that's awesome. Once again, the thing that I would tell you that you want to pay attention to is where do all these things go and where's the next gen going to come around? Because it's going to be interesting. Intel's got CPUs and GPUs that should help bring some supply chain issues back. Intel doesn't have a name for itself in the GPU market, so hopefully their products will be out there and available to people, and they might sell quickly because they sell at MSRP, or close to it, I should say. Hopefully there's a way that I can get a couple of them myself to test, because I'd like to be able to tell you guys how it's going. Like I said, I will say this. I've been testing an A2000 that I bought myself, and I'm really interested to see what the 12 gig card could do. It is a lot more powerful than I expected out of a 70 watt package. Keep in mind, the A2000 does not need a dedicated power supply. It runs off PCI Express power. That right there is impressive.
Nice.
It is a double wide card, so like a lot of your thin builds, your thin client builds can't really support them, but still pretty cool. So keep in mind all these things that are changing, everything that's coming out. Don't necessarily jump ship right yet. If you're starting to look out there for what you're going to start buying for your corporation wise, I'd give it 3 to 6 months before I started pulling triggers on bids and whatnot, because that's going to be that's going to be the time when all this stuff finally reaches the distribution channels and people like Chris can get a hold and make some builds for you guys. So prepare yourselves, though. Technology is changing a lot right now. As we kind of close up and make this a little bit shorter than normal episode, which I'm happy about too. Trying to keep them a little bit shorter. The key facts to remember are this: AMD is launching stuff that is competitive. Intel is launching things that is competitive. Make sure that you're doing your research on which product you need, because once again, depending on your software stack, and I can't stress that enough. Do the software research. A lot of your software will use one format or one version better than the other. And if you're not sure which, and you're just jumping the gun and pulling the trigger, you might end up with something that is not quite the level that you need it to be. So make sure your software is optimized for AMD or optimized for Intel. AMD has been spending a bunch of money on that recently. They want to get their software name known very well. So hopefully everybody pays attention to that. But for us, not your typical IT guys, we'll see you guys in the near future. We'll post up and let you guys know when we're going to do our next podcast here soon. This is Don't Call Me for IT support, but we're always looking for emails, always looking for comments to apply to. The link is in the description below. Our link tree does give you access to shoot us an email if you'd like. And we'd be happy to help and answer questions for y'all. Until next time, I'm Brad.